Welcome back to Not Another Press Release, the podcast where we move beyond the headlines and the formal statements to talk about the work happening across government and across our community. Today's episode brings together two conversations that, in different ways, are about Gibraltar's future. In the first part of the programme, we're talking about young people, the spaces where they meet, the support systems around them, and the work being done through Gibraltar's youth service to help them navigate the challenges of growing up today. From youth clubs to school programs to initiatives that encourage leadership and active citizenship, youth work has evolved significantly over the years as the needs of young people themselves have changed. Later in the episode, we turn to a very different but equally important conversation, one about Gibraltar's constitutional development in the post-Brexit era. I'll be speaking with the Deputy Chief Minister about the UK-EU Treaty on Gibraltar, what it means for Gibraltar's future relationship with Europe, how it fits into Gibraltar's constitutional framework, and where things currently stand in terms of implementation. So from the everyday work of supporting young people to the long-term constitutional direction of Gibraltar, today's episode looks at two conversations about where we are now and about where we're going next. Welcome to Not Another Press Release. Joseph, welcome to Not Another Press Release, which is the government podcast where we try to get into things in a slightly more personal way and try also to talk about more big picture kind of conversations to hear what political leaders and civil servants think and feel about the world around us and the big issues of our time. The big issue of our moment is the Brexit Treaty. We've had a couple of crazy weeks since the publication of the treaty text. How are you feeling right now after this big rush? How do you sort of analyze the situation where we are now? How are things?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to come on this podcast. As you know, it's not something I tend to do very often. But certainly, it's not just a crazy week. I think it's been a crazy time since the vote to leave the European Union, which nobody thought was possible. And probably David Cameron called the referendum because he thought he was going to win the referendum, and it was lost. The whole process of exiting the European Union, again, a lengthy, complex and difficult process for Gibraltar, for UK as well, particularly for Gibraltar. And then since October 2021, the commencement of formal negotiations between the UK, Gibraltar and the European Union for a future relationship. And that has been lengthy, it's been difficult. There have been several strands to it because at the same time as we were preparing and negotiating a treaty, we were also preparing for a no treaty outcome and all the consequences that would bring with it. So as somebody who was very closely involved in that work, in the NNO work, I actually am very relieved and thankful that we obtained a treaty and we are now in the process of ratifying it and seeing it implemented, because the alternative to that would not have been worth thinking about.
And sort of, I've been very much in touch with the media responses, and I've been in touch with some journalists who've been sort of framing the issue in quite sort of controversial ways. How do you feel when you see some headlines that seem clearly to follow like an agenda? And you find all of this work that has been put into this suddenly be sort of subjected to that treatment, not put through the meat grinder of political agenda and the media.
I mean, I have to say that is not exclusively something that happens in relation to the treaty. It happens in a number of different areas. But I suppose everyone is entitled to their opinion. It may not be a view that we share, but people are entitled to freely express it in the society that we live. But what I do think, and what I do feel very strongly, is that it's important to have an informed opinion. So if anybody's going to make a view or a statement, it should be borne out by the facts and by the events and by in this case, the text of the treaty as it is and what that means. So all that needs to be thrown into the melting pot, and I think it needs to be properly balanced. And it's very easy nowadays with social media to distort views and to give views and interpretations which are inaccurate. So it's important, certainly from our perspective as a government, to make sure that we put out the correct information. We publish the treaty, so the text is out there for for everybody to see. At the same time as it was published by the European Union and the United Kingdom. The text is there, people can read it, they can make up their minds. But certainly those of us who've been involved in the detail of the negotiation are well aware that the text that has emerged is very different to the original negotiating position of the other side. I mean, we have to bear that in mind. So people won't understand how a particular word or phrase has evolved in the process of 4 or 5 years of negotiation, and there have been fundamental changes in many areas of the treaty as a result of the fact that we had to push back. So the other side came across with views and opinions and with a formal negotiating position. So did we. We push, we give and take. In this particular instance, there were 4 parties around the table, effectively, the UK, Spain, the European Union, and Gibraltar. Each had their own views. There were nuances between us and the UK, particularly when there was a Brexiteer administration in power in London. So all that needed to be managed and needed to be balanced. And some of that doesn't come out. People have not gone through the journey of what it meant to be in a negotiation from the very, very beginning, and to understand every nuance, every change, every turn, every discussion and every argument. You see the finished text, the 1,000 pages, which emerge at the end of that process. So it's important to bear in mind that where we started was in a very different position to where we have emerged. And I think the overall, despite the imperfections of the treaty, and we've made it very clear that the treaty is not perfect, but overall we have emerged in a good place.
And how do we go about trying to communicate? And it's very, very difficult to communicate this treaty from our position, no? Which is a sort of the smallest party in the equation, but at the same time the party with the biggest interests, no? Or at least a community whose life is going to be most profoundly transformed, no? How do we go about conveying these nuances that have to do with a long relationship, a long, complex, nuanced and changing negotiation, the audacity and the creativity that's been put into the treaty, not just in the letter of the text, but also in all sorts of operational realities that will emerge from it, that, you know, maybe people just see the coverage, they see the letter, and they miss those nuances, and they're very difficult to communicate, right?
They're very difficult to communicate. And I've met quite a few people. I was surprised by the number of people who stopped me to say that they're in the process of reading the treaty text. I think that is a good thing, because then you inform yourself with what it says. But there are, for example, there may be headlines which are surprising or shocking, or whatever word you want to use. And then when you dig down, you actually find that because of the level of mitigation and because of the degree of protection inserted in the text, it's never going to happen.
Exactly.
So, for example, one example of that was this question of patrolling between border crossing points at the port and airport.
I was going to use the same.
Shock, horror, how people don't have them patrolling. Well, when you actually read the text, you find that there is a dispensation, a derogation from establishing a border crossing point at the port. So that is why, for example, we stopped ferries coming in from third countries, primarily from Morocco. It's why cruise liners would only be able to call here after calling at the EU or calling at a port in the United Kingdom. That safeguarded the port in terms of having a permanent border crossing point over there. So what it means is there are no true border crossing points to be able to patrol from one to the other, firstly. And secondly, even if there were, it says that patrol happens when the border crossing point is closed. We've said already the airport will be open for 24 hours because there are people coming from the port who may need to be processed at the airport. That means it's never going to happen. So in the same way as you have this particular one in relation to patrolling and between border crossing points, there are others in the treaty where if you dig down into the detail of the text, it means it's not going to happen.
I remember when I started in this job, I tried to get a bit of an overview of where things were and kind of how the different players in the scene, the kind of roles people had, to understand the dynamics of number 6. One of the things that I remember being told was that in anything related to the treaty and treaty negotiations, you were particularly hawkish, and which is not something that was obvious to me from the outside. Is this something that there's always been a part of you? Is this sort of role that you took on in this treaty
strategically? Like, how did it come about? Tell me about this role as a very hawkish kind of agent in the equation.
Well, it wasn't a role in the sense there was something that we planned and we set out to do. There are things I've always believed in, and you want to maintain and uphold those principles as you go through the negotiations or whatever that might be. And probably, I think because of my role as a historian, I'm very aware of what's happened in the past in relation to the history of Gibraltar, where the pitfalls are, where you need to be careful, what words should be used, what words shouldn't be used. So it's in a historical context, if you like, that emerges. Whether you want to call that being a hawk or being careful, it's entirely up to the questioner. But from my perspective, there were certainly certain areas and certain issues where we had very firm red lines, and none of us were prepared to cross those red lines. Obviously, not only me. It's remember at every single stage, you need to remember that the treaty went to cabinet. So when we were in the middle of a negotiation, we would come back, report to the cabinet where we were. Not just this cabinet now, but the previous cabinet as well was also involved, and the chief minister and I would obtain cabinet sanction for every single step that we needed to take to make sure that the rest of the government was fully on board, and not only those who were actually involved in the day-to-day negotiation. So what emerged at the end of it is a product which can count on the full approval of the cabinet. And you'll recall that we had some 8 or 9 sessions where we looked at the final treaty text in depth and in great detail, but it's important to bear in mind also that process that was carried out at every stage as we proceeded with the negotiation of the treaty.
You just mentioned your background as a historian. That's also something I'd like to talk to you about, which is the sort of the significance of this moment in the context of the development of Gibraltar politically. And we've had conversations in the past in my work as a producer for GBC, and I've seen a lot of archival footage, and you have been one of the people who have chronicled the development of the Gibraltar's political development. Where are we now? How does this milestone fit into that story?
Well, I think this is a watershed moment as well. I mean, there have been several in our modern political history, and certainly this is one of them. We can look at it in the EU context, if you like. Obviously, a huge moment in 1973 when the UK decides to join the European Economic Community, and we decide to join as well. That was a fundamental turning point in our history. In 1986, when Spain decides to join what was then the European Community, and the Brexit referendum in 2016, and leaving the European Union in January 2021 at the end of the transition period. I mean, these are historic moments. And I think what it meant for Gibraltar is that this could have gone in either of two ways. From my view, and my perspective, having worked on No Deal, as I said, for so many years, it could have gone very badly. And obviously there were mitigation measures, and we certainly would have made the best of that and made sure that we mitigated in every area that we could, that was within our power to mitigate, but it would have been difficult. Or there was the other alternative, the other fork in the road, of having a treaty, being able to save Gibraltar from the consequences of no treaty and what that meant, and now being able to build a solid future based on law, based on fact, and based on the security which the legal text and the legal security that the treaty will bring us. So it's certainly one of these key moments in the historical development of Gibraltar and in the process of our evolution over 300 years.
And do you feel that this new reality in which we can have a different relationship with the EU than the UK, and we can craft for ourselves a different kind of relationship, all the while obviously under the umbrella of the UK, and this is a treaty which the UK is the signatory, not us, but in a way creates perhaps a path for a different kind of relationship for Gibraltar with the EU in the future. Does that have any significance in terms of our political development, do you think, in terms of our constitutional development?
Well, I think it does a couple of things. First of all, there are references to the European Union in our constitution. And we've always made it very clear that the treaty does not impact on British sovereignty, and that continues as it has done, and there's absolutely no change and no impact and no effect on sovereignty. In fact, all the sides agree that this is not about sovereignty, it's about a relationship, a working relationship between Gibraltar and the European Union. They've always made it very clear from the beginning that once we have settled the relationship with Europe, we then needed to modernize our relationship with the United Kingdom. And that I was a member of Parliament when we voted to start negotiations with the UK on a new constitution. I was a member of the select committee that produced the constitution, and that then went on with the UK to have that negotiation as well, which that ended up in a current constitution. But there is certainly a need, in my view, to now reform and modernize the constitution that we have, not only in the context of the new relationship with the European Union, but in the context of other areas which were identified by a report of the then House of Assembly in 2003, but which didn't materialize. When we entered into that negotiation, you go with a maximalist approach, the UK has this approach, and you settle somewhere in the middle, which is what happened. But there are certain areas there which we would need to look at and reopen again. And an important one, clearly, for us is, which was the most important one, also in the previous constitutional process, was removing Gibraltar from the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories and achieving decolonization in that way.
And do you think this treaty will have an impact on that situation, on the Spanish claim, on the UN, on decolonization?
It has no impact on any of that, and no direct impact. And all the parties accept that it's not about sovereignty, so it doesn't affect that. We have a treaty, which is about our future relationship with the European Union. We have independently an international legal status, which is that of a non-self-governing territory. There are 17 in the world. We are one of those 17. 11 are British. We're one of those 11. And the ultimate objective in the context of decolonization is to be removed from that list. So you have a new status emerges, which is no longer that of a colony, to use the terminology which was used in the 1960s. So that's what we need to work on now. We need to work on modernizing our relationship with the United Kingdom, strengthening our relationship with the United Kingdom, and ensuring that we work forward, we work together and we go forward hand in hand in relation to constitutional issues as well.
And do you think that it will sort of strengthen the argument for delisting once this treaty is operational, signed, ratified?
No, I think the treaty is not directly connected to that. I mean, the element that would lead to delisting would be the updating, the production of a new constitution, and that new constitution would have to be written in terms which are acceptable to the United Nations, and which would mean that a new decolonized status can emerge. Remember, the United Kingdom every year commits, in the meetings we have of the Joint Ministerial Council with the government of the UK and the governments of all the overseas territories, it commits every year to support the removal from the list of territories for those countries who wished.
But even if it's indirectly through the constitution, the fact that Gibraltar has managed to create a different and bespoke relationship with the EU surely is an argument in favor of its own self-governance, right?
No, so certainly in terms of self-government and in terms of the recognition and involvement of our institutions and our competent authorities. I mean, certainly yes, because these are powers which are devolved to Gibraltar under the existing constitution. So the entities that would be involved in the detail of the treaty, in the implementation of it, and in giving it effect, will be Gibraltar competent authorities. And the reason for that is very simple. The competences and the powers which the treaty talks about are powers of the government of Gibraltar under the constitution. So even areas like immigration, areas like customs, are powers of the government of Gibraltar. They're not United Kingdom powers. The UK has the international legal standing and personality to enter into a treaty on behalf of Gibraltar. But the United Kingdom, in respect of Gibraltar, means Gibraltar, its government, its institutions, and its competent authorities.
Okay. So you've now mentioned how we will be the ones making this treaty a reality, implementing it, how this would be an exercise of self-government. Maybe you could start talking a little bit about the implementation of the treaty, which is something that we haven't discussed much in public. There's a lot that depends on work that needs to happen on the other side of the frontier. But what can we tell people of how these preparations are going, where we are right now in that front, how well prepared we are? Because the deadline is less than a month away.
That's right. I mean, the Chief Minister has made very clear in Parliament, 10th of April is the deadline. That is the deadline, not because we've chosen it or because we wanted. We preferred to have had more time, because the EES will come into force at every external border of the European Union, everywhere in the whole of the EU. And that will mean people having to scan their faces, their passports, their fingerprints, answer questions from machine every time you enter the European Union and every time you leave as well. Each person will have to do that. That would create a huge backlog and volume of delays at the border in both directions, if you just visualize so many people going through those machines at the same time of day. And in addition to that, we have made very clear that if that were to happen, Gibraltar would also apply reciprocal measures and install our own machines, our own e-gates, on our side of the border. So that process was very advanced. We were actually about to commit the funds if we had needed to do that. It was very advanced. So in order to avoid all that, we're now working towards the 10th of April deadline for implementation of the treaty. And I think broadly it can be said that it'll be 3 strands. One of them is the actual physical infrastructure, which needs to be built and constructed at the border. I mean, on the other side, the Spanish, you will see, have brought in their own diggers and equipment and are proceeding also at pace. On the Gibraltar side, we've also moved very quickly. It will mean internal changes to the air terminal. The first floor was underutilized, so many corridors were built up there in order to link to the Spanish side, and in terms of the corridor arrangements. We are now making full use of those. Some are being altered, others we are making use of as they are. So that is to accommodate on the first floor the Gibraltar immigration controls and the Schengen immigration controls, which will be on the first floor in this new facilities, really, one on the western side and one on the eastern side of the terminal, equidistant into Spain and into Gibraltar. So that is the basis of the work which is going on there. So that is the technical infrastructure work.
Are we on track to meet the deadline?
I'm told we are completely on track. So it seems to be doing well. There is engagement and contact with the Spanish side. They've been to visit on a few occasions. So the work seems to be progressing well from the information that I have. There's also then the legal implementation, and that would be considerable. And my understanding is the plan is for an overarching piece of legislation, very similar to what we did at the time we left the European Union, when there was the European Union Withdrawal Act, which withdrew us from the European Union, but then left things largely unchanged. There'll be a major overarching framework piece of legislation which will come to Parliament certainly before the 10th of April, all things going well. And then there'll be more time to be able to amend and change or enact new legislation after the 10th of April. So there's a huge amount of work there, led by the Attorney General and his drafting team in the GLO. The third area would be administrative. There are things the administration itself has to do. Identity cards, permits. So the administration itself will need to get used to the implementation of the treaty. So it's technical and infrastructure, it's legal and it's administrative. That's all happening at the same time, and it's coordinated, as you know, by a group of ministers and civil servants. That group is chaired by the Chief Minister, and I chair it when he's not present. So we've had 6 or 7 meetings with that at a top senior level, but effectively this kind of work is now ongoing on a daily basis across the government.
That's great. I have been part of these meetings with you. I've seen the development and the rate of the work that's being done, very impressive. And I think that it was a good opportunity to also talk about all of that work that was poured into the no negotiated outcome scenario that fortunately hasn't materialized. There's a lot of work that goes into preparing, planning, sort of getting ready for hypothetical scenarios that never unfold. I see it in my day-to-day work. It would be interesting if we talked a little bit about it, because the government has poured a lot of resources and time. Tell us a little bit about the work that was done to prepare, maybe that you might want to highlight some of the most significant parts of it.
Well, I think the origins of NNO came soon after the Brexit referendum, when we found we need to analyze the state of the economy in the context of the border and in the context of the difficult border and Gibraltar no longer being part of the European Union. And I remember the Attorney General headed the work on a series of heat maps which needed to be produced, looking at the impact of the border across the entire government, but also across areas of the private sector as well. And it was then with that particular work that it hit you see it all in one document. You saw the impact, for example, of frontier workers, not just in the private sector of the economy, but also in areas like health and care, where a huge amount of those employed in that area were frontier workers, not necessarily Spanish, but people who lived in Spain and came into Gibraltar to work, although many were Spanish citizens. And that focused our mind in terms of the importance that the passage through the border was going to have in any future relationship that emerged. This is very, very beginning. In fact, we have produced this work, have been produced by the Attorney General before the Brexit Department of the United Kingdom even existed. They announced they were going to open or organize or set up a new Brexit department to leave the European Union. And before they'd done that, we already had all that data and all that information ready and compliant to submit to them once they were ready. So it shows that we move very, very quickly at the beginning. So if you always remember the impact which seeing that those tables that look had on me as we're preparing to exit the EU.
And was this work originally designed to sort of go to the UK and say, listen, this is the impact it's going to have on us. We need support, we need help. Or was it already, did you already have in mind the idea of, we want you to help us achieve a new relationship with the EU because this is what we want?
I mean, we had it very clear from what the UK was saying at the time. Remember, these were the Brexiteers after David Cameron had left. And we had it very clear that the relationship that Gibraltar needed to have with the European Union had necessarily to be different from that which the United Kingdom negotiated for itself. Because the UK was interested in barriers, in checkpoints, and controls, and we were interested in the very opposite, in facilitating fluid movement across the border, precisely because of the data and the work that we had done, which showed that was essential to the economy and to the future of Gibraltar. So we started on that basis, and we continued the NNO work even in the run-up to the exit treaty, the withdrawal agreement, because there were a number of times where we and the UK were on a cliff edge as whether you actually leave without a withdrawal agreement and the danger that would have meant to both of us. There at one point it seemed the UK would have its withdrawal agreement and we might not, which was the worst position of all to have been in. But despite what was said at the time, Gibraltar was included in the withdrawal agreement as part of the architecture of UK borders with the EU. So obviously the UK itself, Northern Ireland, which attracted the most media attention, the borders around Cyprus and the UK sovereign bases there, and the border between Spain and Gibraltar. So we managed to go into the withdrawal agreement with the UK and not fall out of the European Union without an agreement, which wasn't the cards at a particular moment in time, particularly when Margallo was foreign minister and in not the time.
Of course. Now you mentioned Margallo, one of the things that I think worry a lot of people is that this treaty, this agreement might be challenged down the line by a hostile Spanish administration. And how we manage that, and how do you see that unfolding? I'm sure you must have thought about this a lot. How do you see the treaty coming under stress from a sort of belligerent Pepe Vox administration? And are you preparing for this kind of scenario? Are you thinking about what we can do in that situation?
So there's several points. One is that our NNO work is done, and it's there, and it's available, and it's produced in files and documents and presentations and what have you. So all the work is there. So we, in terms of measures to mitigate things, we know what we have to do because we've been preparing for that for the last 10 years or so. So as a safeguard, if you like, that element of work remains. Now, secondly, I think we need to look at the bigger picture as well. And the bigger picture here is a relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union, and how we fit into that jigsaw of both the UK and the EU wanting to resolve the question of Gibraltar's relationship with the European Union going forward, because it was the last unsettled piece of business from Brexit. This was the last one. Everything else had been done. So disrupting that balance would mean disrupting the relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union, who are the two parties and signatories to the treaty. So, when we have the discussion, we should bear in mind things can happen. Of course, everything is possible in this world, and nobody's going to question that. But we need to look at the realities and the politics of the situation that we have, where the UK and the EU have a relationship that they value, and how far they would allow a difficult Spanish government to interfere with that relationship when the parties are the United Kingdom and the European Union. So I think we have an element of security in the bigger picture. And also, I think the more uncertain the world becomes, and conflicts in Europe, now conflicts in the Middle East, the more the UK and the EU need to work together.
They said it quite clearly in the last 2 months. Yeah.
That's exactly what they've said. So they will need each other for the bigger picture. So I think in those circumstances, it's also more difficult for a future hypothetical Spanish government that might want to disrupt Gibraltar and disrupt the treaty, disrupt the relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union, which is what that would mean.
Okay, I think that we've gone into it quite a bit. I think I would like to finish by doing a little bit of an exercise as a historian, as a politician, as a person who's been sort of in this vantage point, this 360 vantage point where you've seen Gibraltar grow, Gibraltar change very, very significantly right now in this current juncture. I'd like you to look to the horizon and look to the next 5, 10 years, 20 years. How do you see this? How would you like to see it develop? What is your, you look to the future of Gibraltar and say a decade, where would you like to see it be? And how would you like this path to sort of take off?
So I think the new treaty has set Gibraltar on a road where we can have the best of both worlds. We can have and maintain our historic and valued relationship with the United Kingdom and British sovereignty, modernized in a constitutional sense, decolonized or whatever, but in maintaining the relationship with the United Kingdom, which is extremely important. And on the other hand, also now a treaty relationship enshrined in law with the European Union. That is best of both worlds, not just in a sort of abstract political sense, but also in a real day-to-day sense. Because what do we have as Gibraltarians or Gibraltar residents? Well, we have access to the United Kingdom, for example, without needing to do the pre-authorization regime they've just introduced because we're British. But we have access to the European Union without getting to do their pre-authorization scheme either because of the treaty. So citizens will have access to both. Then we have our companies in financial services, online gaming, will have access to the United Kingdom market as they do today. We haven't lost that access. The treaty does not affect services in any way. But we'll also have access to the goods market in the European Union for the first time in our history through the EU, through our relationship with the customs union of the European Union. So it gives us a best of both worlds. And over the next 10 years, I'd like to see Gibraltar take advantage of that.
Okay, thank you very much, DCM. Lovely to have you here. And we'll be inviting you down the line to see how things progress and have more chats like these.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, Abdul, welcome to Not Another Press Release.
Thank you.
This week we're going to do a conversation that will sort of revolve around the young people, education, and we wanted to have you to get your take on a slightly more sort of informal work of government that he does through you guys and the youth clubs. I was involved this week in the Future Pathways you've been organizing in schools. But let's start talking a little bit about Youth Club and the youth service generally. After this rebrand you've had, maybe you can tell us a little bit where you guys are in your path, how things are going for you.
Okay, so yes, we've just launched with a rebrand, and that stemmed from the idea of us wanting to have a little bit of a more renewed presence online. So we came up with a new logo that we were very happy with, black and yellow, obviously. We've got the hoodies, we've got the t-shirts. Charlene and Aroa have been leading on the rebrand, so they've done an amazing job. So now we have a new website that has been very much worked by our colleagues Leon and Jordan in the ministry. And there we always had to, again, look at our mission statement, at our values, revamp that a little bit to make it more modern and more appropriate to the landscape of youth work right now. So we have the new website, we have the Instagram page, we have the Facebook page, and obviously the new logos and all the branding kit that goes behind it. So we're quite happy with it.
Almost definitely. I think it's fresh, it's something new, and it's us just refocusing. Yeah. And reconnecting with ourselves, and now, like Rebecca said, going back to looking at our mission statements, and I think we're all excited, and it's everyone bought into it. I think
because you've been doing youth work for quite a while now, no? So you must have seen the whole transition
into
a modern era.
What's changed? Were you referring to sort of modernizing what youth work means today?
Yeah.
What change have you seen?
Well, I started working in 2002 when I had just completed my license in youth and community work, and I can tell you that it's changed absolutely massively. I was in the thick of practice for about 14 years at the very beginning of my career, and where traditionally maybe our client groups were the teenage years, the classic 12, 13 to maybe 18 or 19. Right now, our client group has dropped significantly in the sense of the ages. So we cater for 7-year-olds and upwards, and we even go as far as to 30-year-olds.
Oh, wow.
So automatically there, when you're dealing with very, very young children, our reach is bigger. And we also have more connections with parents and guardians. So there, automatically, the youth worker has to communicate a lot with parents, with guardians around the basic needs of the child. And catering for a more adult client group also has its complexities in the way that we need to safeguard young people in youth work provision. So the landscape has changed massively in the terms of the ages and the reach, and the needs are far more complex, I believe, nowadays.
Certainly, I would even add to that, our work with the community has also expanded. So it's quite, we take a holistic approach where we work with the young people, their families, and even other shareholders, where there might be, I'm sure we're going into this education or in the social services. So we're busier than ever. Yeah, and that's a good sign, because young people, as we know, they vote with their feet, and they don't have to come to the clubs, but we are fully subscribed. And also, I'd like to add to that, as a disability disorder department, we now we're very inclusive in the sense of we have young people with needs, and we absorb them, and it's a thing of a beauty to see the interaction amongst all of them. Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you guys have 3 clubs at the moment? You have Gibraltar, the Lightnall one, and Dolphins?
We have 4 youth clubs. One of them is Laguna Youth Club, but right now it's going through a refurbishment. So the youth work is actually happening from one of the rooms in the GSLA, in the boathouse area. So that's the Laguna Youth Club. And as you said, all the other rest of the clubs, Plata, Dolphins, and the Youth Centre.
That's right.
Yeah, I do think that the 3 neighbourhood clubs do a lot of neighbourhood work, so to speak, but the youth centre has always been seen as a neutral base where more targeted approaches to youth work can actually happen from that club.
You still do events there? I remember being 15, 16, events, going to gigs.
Yeah.
In the one in Lightnall.
The needs have changed through the years, and I do think that we try and cater a little bit for everything. But we have very defined ages on different days at the youth club. So we're trying to, target the work around that particular age group. So each day there's a different age group that goes to a club. So it's very individualized programs and very sort of like person-centered approaches.
Certainly. And youth work doesn't only happen in the clubs. It also takes place in schools. We've been, I think, over the last 20 years going into comprehensive schools, and college has been added to that. Because the needs are there, and we want to meet young people where they're at, not wait for them till they come through the door, and reach out. And obviously, Rebecca will also go into the other projects, like the Youth Symposium, which is a fantastic project.
Yeah, the Youth Symposium is one of my favorite programs at the moment. It started in, I think it was November 2023. And it's basically trying to develop active citizenship work for young people. So it's led by Minister Santos, Minister for Youth. So he holds sort of Q&A sessions with young people, and sometimes we bring in like a guest speaker or a different minister, and we try and look at all the issues that young people bring up, and then we try and, you know, facilitate those conversations. So it's trying to bridge the gap between the politics and the young people, get them interested in civic society issues, and try and develop that thirst for problem-solving skills, debating skills, you know, trying to put things on for them that matter. So it's very dynamic, and it's got a lot of interest.
There's always this conversation going on in every generation about the problems of the youth today, no? Like there's all the youth today are always in some form or another sort of doing things wrong or devaluing society or losing their values. Or yesterday I had a long chat with Kerry Scott about the changes they're implementing in schools to try and cope with the new digital age and the new challenges brought by technology. What have you seen in the young people themselves? How have they changed? How have their needs changed? How is your relationship with them changed?
Well, the conversations at the moment are very much about well-being, mental health, disability, social media. Those topics weren't mentioned so much 20 years ago. So now they're at the forefront of the conversations. Young people are consuming news all the time via social media. I grew up in a generation where that was not happening. So they are consuming news with much more frequency. They are worried about certain things. They are reflecting that, you know, and all these things are the issues that are rising to the fore, and they are bringing it to the professionals. So in the same way that they bring it to teachers, they bring it to youth workers, to social workers, and all the allied professionals in the field. I think that there is a lot more drive to get support out there for young people, and there is support. And a lot of the times it's signposting young people to the right support. In the youth work context, maybe you can add to that.
No, for sure. The thing is, it's interesting you said that, and young people have always been trailblazers, but I don't. There's needs there, but I also think the current generation, they are dealing with a lot of things, a lot of pressures. So we have to give them some credit as well. Yeah. Because we have young people that are aware of what's going on in the world, what's going on locally, and I think a lot of them are stepping up to the plate. We have a fantastic project aimed at young people, where young people we're training them to become young leaders, and it's beautiful. It's a thing of beauty to see that how they are taking on that responsibility and supporting their peers, so to say. So obviously there's challenges, but there's also I've seen a lot of growth. I've been with the youth service since 2014, and you know there's some positive things and some things we're improving on. So and that is what makes our job, I think, really worthwhile.
Well, Abdul, what was your background before you came to do youth work in Gibraltar? Have you done youth work elsewhere in the world?
I was always involved with basketball, so I was doing youth work without knowing I was doing youth work, if that makes sense, in a sporting setting. And it's actually helped me, in my opinion, to become a better youth worker in that sense. So I was always in the sporting environment. I've studied events and sports management, and I grew up in Holland. I've studied in London. I've worked in London in a charity where sports was provided for less advantaged young people, and in a way that prepared me for the job I'm doing right now. It has supplemented to that.
Of course. And did you find the job in Gibraltar has had some kind of unique challenges?
Oh yeah. Oh yes, it is, and it's been a good learning process for me, because nothing seems to be straightforward, and it's obviously a small place, and it comes with benefits, also some things that are different to where I grew up.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think it's good, because the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, that is definitely applies to Gibraltar. And that is it is unique, but it's a good challenge, and I'm really enjoying it.
Great. I just took part this week in one of the chats you organised for the students in Westside for the Career Pathways event. How did it go? What did you guys? What kind of feedback did you get? How is that part of the work that you do?
That is one of our really, really beautiful programs that we have. And it's like a partnership with Education Department and CIPD. Charlene and Jamie from our team are the ones that are driving it. So I think it's been happening for 3 or 4 years already. And we're always invited to facilitate panels. So we're responsible for example, I had the one of marketing and PR. So I had to contact the professionals, send them an email, get them engaged in wanting to participate. So we put on panels of different industries made up of allied professionals. And there they have the chance of talking about their life experience or what qualifications or experience they need to get into that particular line of work. And then we have like a Q&A with the students. So it's an amazing opportunity for young people to see real lived experiences from the professionals in the field to see if they click to that career or not, or maybe are slightly interested in it. So yeah, it's a very well attended event. It's a Herculean task because I think there are 3 full days of panels, but we really enjoy it as well because we put ourselves out there, we build connections, and Gibraltar is all about connections and networks. We get to build connections with the business community, with people that are working in similar or very different industries, but then they get to know about the youth service and what the education department do. So it's a win-win for everyone, and I think the young people really benefit from that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that must be like a really rewarding thing at the end of the day, because how does it feel when you see someone that you've maybe worked with as when they were youth growing up, having a successful career, and you still see that person, because Gibraltar's so small that you tend to bump into everyone. It's like, it must be feeling very rewarding, to say, we had a hand in this person's guidance and future career, and he's where he is today because, the youth service exists and helped them out to.
It's a beautiful thing. And to be honest, sometimes the returns don't come immediately, but the returns do come. And they are very much beyond the spreadsheet, because sometimes they are those intangible benefits that you think, okay, what is the return on investment? Because there is a cost associated to the youth service, but we have a massive reach. We have countless of hours of youth work exposure per week. We have lots of young people coming to our provision. Lots of them stay long term. Some of them are fleeting in and out of the service. But the return on investment is that we have given them a place where they can be themselves. And how do you put that in a spreadsheet? You can explain it as a practitioner. You can have a banter with other allied professionals and within the team. But the benefits are there. They tell you that they really enjoy coming to the club. They carry on coming. And that is basically the return on investment, that they carry on coming. They're engaged. And sometimes the young people are very open to disclose what's going on in their lives. So they have a lot of trust because they do feel that it's a safe space. So the return on investment comes back in different ways, but it comes back, and they usually do tell us that their fun times were when they used to attend.
It is very rewarding. At times can be challenging, but like Rebecca said, it's a thing of a beauty to see a young person grow, and it's just those informal chats you have with them when you bump into them. Hey, how's it going? They're grateful, and they will mention it. And like Rebecca said, it's not you don't see it immediately, but you see through the family how they appreciate what you do, and you're like, it's my job. And in
the sense of like retention, because I noticed you mentioned like you get a lot of people that may show up for a year, a couple of months, and then they might not come up again, and then they might come back again. Like my son, he went through the phase where he just went, I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays to the Plater. It was there every time, and he did a whole year. Then he just moved on to the next thing.
And that's actually quite healthy.
Did you find that's quite common as well, I suppose?
It does happen. And it's healthy that they move on to different things, because we are not all about, retaining them forever. It's about giving them an experience that they're having fun, that when they need it, and they don't know that they need it, but they need it for the social aspect, maybe just for a bit of fun. Maybe they don't have PlayStation at home and they play it there. So they don't know why they're coming, but they're coming because there's a vibe and they're attracted to the service.
The social aspect, no?
The social aspect,
all of them are together.
Absolutely.
A recent example was some of our former members going to uni and just coming back, even for 5 minutes. We want to see you guys. How's it going? Do you miss us? And it's like those interesting conversations you have with them. Nice. And that's a belonging that they will always have that connection with us. And they know whatever stage they're in their life, we are there for them, even if it is for a 5-minute chat.
We will try and build that community with them,
You also mentioned how you work with different departments. And I imagine that through the work you do in the youth clubs, you get a kind of sort of unique kind of vantage point to see what's happening inside of many
kids' lives, personal lives. I imagine sometimes you also have conversations with, say, for example, social services, and you can have a bit of insight into problematic things that kid might be experiencing at home. Is there that dimension to your work also?
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, we see young people in their time when they are themselves and they're free and they are in that safe space. So sometimes the youth workers might have a very different perspective to a social worker or teacher because they are experiencing them in their setting, in a statutory setting with a different terms of reference. So we see them sometimes in a different light, and sometimes we agree that maybe this person is deteriorating or maybe doing better, but there are moments where we see that they don't see, and that is the uniqueness of the youth work perspective.
Of course. And you identify sometimes when kids might require some kind of special support and things like that. Has that kind of thing happened before?
Certainly. The thing is, what we try to do is as soon as they come through the doors is build a rapport with them. And Rebecca said the uniqueness is that they open up naturally, and that is the base, the relationship of trust that we have with them, and they know that obviously we're there to support them, and that's the base we start off, and then from there we do whatever is needed to make sure that a young person is safe, whether it's in school, whether it's at home, or on the streets. So a lot of work goes into it, but that's what we're there for.
Like, and from an aspect, because obviously you speak to a lot of the kids, and they have a healthy relationship with you guys where they open up probably more than they do with the teacher or even family. There's this common problem, I would say, in Gib, where young kids don't have a lot of things to do. Essentially, they don't have a skate park. There's no place for them to go with a bicycle, and you see them going down Calle Comedia because they're finding stuff to do.
I've seen those videos.
Like, I'm sure they sort of, you must have these conversations
also,
with them, right?
kids go out less now, no? They do less of like hanging out in the street like we used to when we were younger. That doesn't happen so much anymore.
The landscape has changed massively. Gibraltar used to have a very much of a patio culture 20, 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But now, obviously, those things do still come up, and we do get references to that. When I was doing the research for the youth strategy for Gib, I had a lot of meetings with young people in small focus groups, in bigger settings, in smaller settings, and also with allied professionals. And those were the recurring issues that they do still bring up.
Yeah.
Healthy social life and events for young people under 16s is a recurring issue.
Yeah.
Also, more needs for open free access areas that is not controlled by a gate.
Yeah.
And that has a timetable. So I thought it was very interesting when I was talking to young people about this, because they said we need more places where we can just rock up and be.
And be there.
And also the difference of Gibraltar in the winter and Gibraltar in the summer. Gibraltar has a very big beach culture, and young people, they stay in the beaches till 10, 11 or 12 at night. And that is very welcomed, and it's very used. So I think that Gibraltar has a very different lifestyle in the summer and the winter as well. But these are the recurring issues that sometimes come up, the lack of spaces, unstructured places, places where you don't have to download an app and make a booking for, if I can put it in that box, and also the safe nightlife for under 16s. The classic mental health support does also come up. Careers advice comes up, but I think that we're trying to address that via different collaborations with education department and different allied professionals.
If I look back growing up, being a teenager, and the nightlife, we at that time, I feel like my generation did have places to go. There were certain establishments serving like events for under 16 or under 18s, but like my daughter who's now going to turn 15, I don't see anything for her. Like, there's a big gap in between, like, being a young kid where you can go to, like, a play park, you can go to any park, The gap between, like, being a 10-year-old to a late teen, there seems to be something missing. No, I think it's safe to say that.
I think attitude has a lot to do with it as well. Sometimes we really want to, how do you call it? But sometimes we can be overprotective.
Yes, definitely.
You see an area that maybe in the past would have been free for today, no ball games. You're like, but why not?
Why not?
Why not let them just kick a ball here and there? So I think attitude has a lot to, and hopefully we can meet the young people somewhere in the middle, where we do give those opportunities.
There has been certain efforts in putting on safe events for young people, but sometimes they're not very well attended. So it's very difficult one to crack. And sometimes I want young people to lead on these events so that there's more of a buy-in from young people. But I think the trends have a lot to do with it as well, and people more of a staying in culture.
The nightlife culture has changed completely, like teenagers don't, like I have a 17-year-old stepdaughter. She's constantly in touch with her friends through technology, obviously, and she sees them in school and sometimes they hang out. But we used to go out systematically every weekend. It doesn't really happen anymore, right?
It was a different culture back then. Absolutely. I think it was very healthy that we were much more outdoors, but it doesn't look like that is happening.
Not in the same way.
No.
Not in the same way.
And is that manifesting as a problem? You think that the kids don't socialize as much as they should, or in the way that they should? Because I mean, I also remember that nightlife connected to substances and alcohol and all these things that obviously not very healthy and that don't happen so much today.
We don't see those client groups very often because we see them in the youth club and they come with their friendship groups and sometimes alone to make friends. So we actually see them wanting to make friends and wanting to do things outside home. But I wouldn't quite know if these are rising issues in the educational settings, etc.
The thing is, we try to be creative for the young people and keep them busy, but not for the sake of it, So they learn through activities, through interactions, you know what I mean? And offer them a different perspective. For example, we have a good link with the GFA. They've given us complimentary tickets for the game tomorrow. We take them to the game. So we go. So and like Rebecca said, when they, as soon as they come to our youth clubs, they're fully subscribed, busy, and that is a beautiful thing. So we try to limit the being on the phone and stuff. You don't take it away, but you just to informing them, hey, listen, instead of being an hour on the phone, how about 10, 15 minutes? You do something. Okay, let's play dodgeball. Let's do this. Let's cook some. Let's do arts and crafts, and just give them different experience than they might have, sitting home. Yeah.
Abdul, you mentioned that it takes a village, to raise children. Now that we are talking to the village, what do we need to do? What can we do better as a community to sort of adapt and be receptive to the needs of young people today?
I think support from the community and a bit of understanding and giving the young people a break, so to say, as well, and getting dialogue. If there's any concern, come talk to young people, ask them, don't tell them what to do. I think that will go a long way. Just showing understanding will make a difference because some of them feel misunderstood. Yeah. I think that's, what do you think?
I agree with that. Yeah.
Is there any other message maybe that you would want to communicate in terms of how we're adapting as a society to the changes that the youth is experiencing and that you guys have a unique perspective about?
I think young people need to be given an opportunity to for example, if they're looking for work, and a lot of them don't have experience a lot. So maybe giving them an opportunity for an internship, I think that would go a long way. And I think that as a community, those opportunities could be made safely for young people. And I know that we live in a culture of duty of care and having police checks and having references, and that is absolutely vital. But sometimes the young people just need that little bit of a window of opportunity and a bit of that type of support. So I think that starting them off in their work journeys is crucial. And I know that there are big employment opportunities around becoming a lifeguard, perhaps, or the Stay and Play program. I think more opportunities like that would be very welcomed because they need to start somewhere. Yeah. And then at the end of the day, young people, that experience of in the workplace is absolutely crucial because no one prepares you really for the world of work. It's like when you go to university, I said it in my Future Pathways when I was a panelist, you go to uni and you learn the degree of that industry or that specialism that you want to get into. But there is no module of learning to become an employee. That is where
team player,
and it's absolutely crucial. It goes hand in hand. You learn how to become an employee, but you're also learning how to execute your job and to put that into practice. So learning those skills is absolutely crucial. Problem solving skills, learning how to become a team player. Not everyone is going to get on 100% with everyone that you're working with, but you have to manage those obstacles and develop that resilience and that character. I think
the stuff you just mentioned, very important, even just communication. And that is the stuff we do with them day in, day out. They might not realize it, and so that is learning through doing things and going through the process. And that is, I think, that is some of the way we engage with young people. the normal session, but with a lot of things, if you really think about it, you can check it. And then hopefully when they realize it, they'll put that into practice. And that's why it's really important to get them out of the house, go interact with each other.
There's a wealth of NGOs out there in the community that will give you lots of opportunities to upskill yourself. It doesn't only have to be the youth service, but there's a lot of different opportunities out there. And there is a very good training ground to get them to develop to the next level.
I think critical thinking nowadays is one of the most important aspects that the youth need to like make sure that they're learning. You know, we're moving into an era where we don't know what's real or fake anymore with AI and technology and everything in front of your face. And like, you know, I have these conversations with my kid. He'll show me, you know, something that he's seen on the internet, and I'm like, that's fake. And, you know, just last week he showed me one of the right-wing newspapers in the UK posted this graphic about World War III targets, and Gibraltar was one of them.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, I'm terrified. It's this newspaper. We have beef with this newspaper already. Like they are known for putting out this crap, like, you know, and it's obviously a kid is impressionable. They see that on their TikTok, Instagram, whatever, and you freak out. So, like, I think critical thinking is one of the most important aspects, or one of the biggest obstacles that we're going to have in the next 10 years.
That's a really good point, because AI is being widely used. And even when you feed information to an AI, if you're doing your first draft to a proposal, reading what the AI gives you and having that critical thought of this is good or this is bad, you cannot just take verbatim word for word for what the AI has given you. But we come
from the analog world.
We come from the analog world, which gives you the skills to decipher what is good that the AI gives you or not. So
they have a rough deal. Kids these days, they have to face these changes in the world of work, which are going to be incredibly disruptive. These new technologies that are super challenging to really sort of understand. They're going to be facing the impact of climate change. They're going to be. I talk about this a lot with my stepdaughter. They really have been put in a very difficult position through no fault of their own.
Yeah.
So we have to be empathetic. No, we have to understand the situation they're in and their frustrations, and cut them a bit of slack.
Certainly, and obviously the social media is one of the biggest, you know. And we always tell them, we give them advice. Don't compare yourself, you know, to maybe other kids from, for example,
curated version of another person.
Exactly, because you know that's not they give you the perfect picture, but you don't know what's happening behind it. And like we said, the critical thinking, we want them to question things, and get in dialogue with them. I think that's the best learning tool. Let them ask questions and be free to ask whatever, and we have to give them the best advice we can give. But at the end of the day, they have to make up their own.
Exactly. They need to be able to see both sides and read into both things, and then, you know, come up to a conclusion. Just don't take everything at face value nowadays, because it's dangerous.
Okay, Rebecca, Abdul, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for allowing us to have a bit of a window into the lives of young people in the community today, and thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Not another press release.